Have you ever wondered what connects a peasant woman in a forgotten village, an empress who ruled an empire, a queen buried in red, and a painter who turned her pain into beauty? Across centuries, they carried the same invisible flame, the will to endure, to create, to love, beyond sorrow. This is their story, a journey through the fire that never dies. Welcome to Gentle Sleep Stories, a peaceful corner of the night where soft, calming tales help you drift easily into deep, restful sleep. If you've had a long day and your mind won't slow down, just take a deep breath and let my voice guide you into a world of quiet dreams and gentle moments. Before we begin tonight's story, don't forget to subscribe so I can take care of your sleep every night with soothing stories made just for you. Now get comfortable, close your eyes, and let everything fade away. It's time to relax and let the story carry you into sleep. Sweet Dreams. Chapter 1. The Morning Bell of 1325. The night has passed like a heavy blanket drawn over the world. The stars fade one by one, and the silence that held you now loosens its grip. Somewhere in the distance, a bell begins to toll, low, slow, and ancient. It's the sound that calls you across centuries, guiding you gently out of sleep and into another life. When your eyes open, the year is 1325. You are lying on a bed of straw that creaks with every breath. The air smells of earth and damp wood, the kind that never quite dries no matter how many fires you light. A thread of dawn creeps through a crack in the wall, painting a thin stripe of silver across your face. The bell keeps ringing, and each note seems to ripple through the mist outside over rooftops made of thatch and smoke. This is not a dream, though it feels like one, the kind that blurs the line between the living and the memory of the world. You sit up slowly. The straw crackles beneath you. The blanket that covers you is rough and heavy, woven from wool that remembers every hand that spun it. It smells of the animals that once gave it of rain, and of long nights spent beside the same dying fire. There are no soft pillows, no sheets, no scent of soap, just the scent of life, raw, unfiltered, persistent. You can hear movement around you. A cough, a whisper, the faint bleating of a goat somewhere too close to the door. Your family sleeps beside you, curled under the same patchwork of fabric in need. There is no such thing as privacy here, only the shared rhythm of survival. You can almost hear their dreams, shallow, restless, but still dreams. Someone stirs a child, perhaps, and the sound of a tiny yawn floats into the chill. When you swing your feet to the ground, the earth greets you with its cold. The floor is made of packed dirt, damp from last night's rain. You feel the sting of it against your skin, sharp and alive. Somewhere beyond the walls, the village is awakening too. The bell still tolls the church's call, the medieval alarm clock that spares no one. Its echo bounces off the wooden beams, and in its deep vibration, you sense the pulse of 1,000 mornings that came before yours. Outside, the sky is the color of pewter. Smoke from a dozen hearths begins to twist upward, pale and uncertain in the wind. A rooster calls, not proudly, but as if merely fulfilling an ancient duty. The world is simple here, but not kind. And yet there is beauty in that simplicity, the beauty of breath, turning to mist of light, finding its way through a hole in the roof of life that insists on continuing. You open the door, and the cold rushes in, smelling of mud and wood smoke. The village path is narrow, uneven, traced with puddles reflecting the faint orange of the rising sun. Somewhere a woman calls out to her child, her voice soft but firm, like a song sung 1,000 times. A dog barks lazily. A cartwheel squeals. The morning unfolds not with haste, but with a tired grace. You pause for a moment, taking it all in. The bell has stopped, but its echo lingers in the air, a reminder that time here moves not by hours, but by habits. The milking, the baking, the praying, the endless repeating of the same fragile rituals. You are part of that rhythm now, and though you do not remember how you arrived, you understand it instinctively. This is a world where every breath is a small victory. Your stomach growls. Hunger is not an emergency here, it is a companion. You glance toward the neighbor's hut where a thin column of smoke rises. Someone is already stirring a pot over the fire. The smell of boiled grain drifts through the damp morning, coarse, faintly sour, but comforting in its familiarity. Soon it will be your turn to eat. But not yet. For now there is work to be done before breakfast. There is always work to be done. A chicken darts past your feet, clucking indignantly, followed by another and another. You smile despite yourself. Even here, in a world of fleas and frost, there is humor, small, stubborn, uninvited. You step outside, fully pulling your cloak tighter. The horizon stretches before you in a patchwork of fields and fog. The earth looks tired, but it is still breathing. Somewhere deep within it, seeds wait, sleeping like tiny hearts. You walk toward the well. The bucket creaks as you lower it into the darkness. When it splashes, the sound feels sacred. The water that rises is cloudy, but it glitters in the light. You take a sip, cautious, and it tastes of iron and life. The same taste your ancestors knew, the same that will one day be forgotten. For a moment you close your eyes. The chill runs through you, anchoring you to this place, to this hour, to this strange miracle of being alive at all. And then faintly, you hear laughter. Children running through the mud, chasing a goose that refuses to be caught. Their joy cuts through the gray like sunlight through mist. You realize that even in this world of struggle, laughter survives thin as thread, but unbreakable. You feel your shoulders ease, your breath soften. Somewhere deep in your chest, warmth flickers like a hidden ember. You return to the doorway of your hut, watching as the morning settles into its familiar rhythm. Smoke rises straight now, the wind having calmed. The sound of a distant hammer echoes faintly from the smithy. Life continues not easily, not beautifully, but faithfully. You think of how many mornings have looked exactly like this, and how many more will follow after. The thought doesn't sadden you. It soothes you. There is comfort in repetition in the ordinary, in knowing that nothing extraordinary is required to belong to the world. You sit on the low stool by the fire, hands outstretched to the small flame that still struggles to live. It warms your fingers just enough. You breathe in the scent of smoke and earth and something faintly sweet, maybe hope, though you wouldn't call it that. You close your eyes for a moment, and the world hums softly around you. Outside, the first rays of the sun finally break free from the clouds, spilling pale gold across the thatched roofs. You whisper a quiet thank you, not to anyone in particular, but to the morning itself, for its persistence, for its honesty, for coming again, even when everything seems too hard. The bell rings once more, far away, now fading into the air. You listen until it's gone, Tomorrow will come the same way, and the day after that. And though life here is hard, you sense something gentle in its rhythm, a lesson perhaps that every dawn, no matter how gray, is still a kind of mercy. And as the wind sighs through the cracks of your wooden door, it feels almost like a lullaby, the world's quiet way of saying you're still here, keep breathing. Chapter 2. Breakfast of Wind and Mist. The night drifts away, leaving only the memory of the bell. The same sound that once woke you now hums softly in your mind, a rhythm too gentle to disturb. You rise again, carried not by will, but by habit, another dawn waiting to be tasted. The morning bell has faded into memory now, leaving behind a hush that feels almost tender. The fire in your hut has burned down to a few orange coals, and the chill creeps back across the floor like a living thing. You sit for a while in the quiet, your hands wrapped around the edge of your wool cloak, still feeling the echo of that last toll. Outside the village is waking roosters, cry carts creak, and smoke curls upward through the silver air. The world is still gray, but it is alive, and so like everyone else you rise. Hunger, soft but insistent, begins to stir in your belly. Your stomach doesn't roar, it sighs. It is the voice of every morning in this age-patient, familiar, unromantic. You reach for a wooden bowl cracked at the rim and carry it toward the fire. On the hearth, a pot hangs from a blackened iron hook, its surface filmed with yesterday's steam. Inside, something thick moves slowly when you stir it with a wooden spoon. Pottage. Not quite soup, not quite stew. More a conversation between water, barley, and hope. The smell is faintly sour, yet comforting in its way, like an old blanket that has seen too many winters. You add a few leaves, a root, a scrap of onion, if fortune smiles on you. Every home in the village has its own version of the same humble miracle. No recipe, no measurement. Just what's left, what's found, what's given. The fire crackles and the bubbles rise lazily to the surface. Each one a fragile promise that this day, too, will begin with warmth. You sit cross-legged on the dirt floor and wait. The steam drifts upward, tracing ghosts in the dim light. You listen to the sounds of morning, the goat stamping her hooves, the faint chatter of neighbors greeting each other through thin walls, the gentle rhythm of spoons against wooden bowls. Breakfast is not a feast here. It is survival dressed in simplicity. And yet there's a kind of grace in it. The kind that belongs only to those who have learned to be grateful for so little. When the stew is ready, you pour a small ladleful into your bowl. It's too hot to eat, so you blow on it softly, watching the mist rise in pale ribbons. The warmth touches your face, and for a brief moment, you feel safe. You take a bite. The taste is humble, earthy, coarse, heavy with grain, but it fills the space inside you, where emptiness used to hum. You chew slowly, thoughtfully, as if this small bowl of pottage holds the secret of endurance. Beside you sits a loaf of bread, dense and dark. You tap it with your finger, and it answers like stone. The crust could fend off an arrow, the crumb dry as dust, but still you break a piece free. You dip it into the stew, letting it soften just enough to become merciful. You chew, feeling each fiber fight your teeth before surrendering. The bread is bitter with rye, but you taste life in it. the soil the rain, the hands that kneaded it with tired strength. Across the village, others are doing the same. Old men bent from years in the fields sit by the fire muttering small prayers. Children scrape bowls clean with their fingers, their laughter muffled by the cold. Somewhere a mother hums a tune to keep her baby quiet, the melody older than memory. It is a morning like thousands before it, and yet it feels uniquely yours. In the rhythm of these small repeated gestures lies the beating heart of this world. There is no coffee to awaken you, no sugar to sweeten the tongue, only ale, weak, cloudy, safer than water. You take a swallow, and it is both bitter and soft, the kind of drink that reminds you you're alive because it refuses to please. It warms your chest, a gentle fire that spreads outward. Even the children drink it, giggling when the taste surprises them. In this age, beer is not an indulgence. It is trust in a liquid form, trust that what you drink today will not betray you tomorrow. You glance at the window, little more than a square cut into wood and covered with cloth. Through it, dawn has turned to a pale morning. The fog hangs low like breath, still deciding whether to leave or stay. You can smell the world now, wet soil smoke and something faintly sweet. Perhaps the promise of spring, though the air still bites. You take another spoonful and the warmth spreads through you like a kind word. For a moment your thoughts drift beyond the room to the fields waiting for you, to the sky that never stops shifting, to the bell that will toll again at noon. Life here is narrow but not meaningless. It moves in circles, eat, work, rest, pray. And within those circles there are small lights, the sound of a child's laughter, the smell of bread, the brief weight of sunlight on your face. The world may not be kind, but it has its moments of mercy, quiet as this one. When your bowl is empty, you trace the rim with your finger, collecting the last taste. You set it down gently, as though thanking it for its duty. The hunger has eased, but not disappeared. It never truly does. It simply steps aside, waiting its turn to return. You rise, brushing straw from your clothes, and move to the door. The air outside greets you again, colder now that the sun is awake. The village hums with life. Men gather tools, women shake out blankets, children chase chickens through the mud. The smoke from the chimneys has thickened, carrying with it the smell of burning wood and barley. Somewhere a voice calls out good-naturedly, and another answers with laughter. There is no rush here, only rhythm, no perfection, only persistence. You pause at the threshold, letting your eyes wander across the patchwork of huts, the crooked fences, the wide field beyond. In another age, people will dream of this time, imagining it filled with knights and castles, with songs and romance. But standing here, you know the truth. The Middle Ages are not gold and glory. They are gray and breath. They are mornings like this, where the act of eating warm food from a rough bowl is not ordinary but sacred. You close your eyes and breathe in the smell of earth and smoke. For just an instant you feel something rise in your chest. Not pride, not joy exactly, but a kind of peace. The peace of being part of something ancient and unspoken. The peace of knowing that even in hunger there is life. Even in poverty there is continuity. The wind stirs your hair, whispering through the cracks in your cloak like a gentle reminder you belong here for now. Behind you, the pot still simmers, a low and patient sound. It will keep cooking all day, absorbing new roots, new flavors, maybe even a bit of hope. And tomorrow, You will taste it again, and it will be slightly different, but also the same as if time itself were stirring the pot. You take one last look at the bowl in your hands, then set it aside. The morning has begun, and with it another small chapter in the endless story of endurance. You step out into the light where the mist curls around your feet like a benediction. Somewhere in the distance a hammer strikes iron. A horse snorts. A child laughs. The world continues its weary, beautiful rhythm. And as you walk toward the fields, belly warm and heart strangely calm, you understand that even in this world of scarcity there is something quietly abundant, the will to go on, the grace to find comfort in the simplest of things. Tomorrow's hunger will come, but so will tomorrow's fire. And somewhere beyond the mist, another bell will ring. Chapter 3. Beneath the wool and the calloused hands. The warmth from the fire fades, but its memory follows you. Outside the day waits gray and patient. The world doesn't rush it. Exhales slowly, as if giving you permission to begin again. The mist still lingers as you leave the memory of breakfast behind. The warmth of the pottage has faded from your belly, but its comfort remains a faint echo of kindness in a world that rarely offers any. The bowl sits by the dying fire, still fragrant with barley and smoke, and as you step outside, you feel the day stretch ahead like an endless road. The ground is soft beneath your feet, wet with the breath of dawn. Somewhere the fields are waiting. So are your tools, your tasks, your tired body, and the quiet dignity that holds all these things together. Your clothes are heavy, stiff from the damp air. The wool scratches at your skin like an impatient memory. You pull it tighter around you, though it itches and clings. It has no softness left, only purpose. The tunic you wear was spun by your wife's hands, patched and repatched until the original fabric is more story than cloth. It smells faintly of smoke and sweat, of labor and love. Every thread carries the history of days just like this one, days of working, aching, enduring. The wind whispers through the thatched roofs and finds its way into your sleeves. You shift your shoulders, feeling the rough seams rub against your neck. Beneath the layers, your skin burns from the constant friction. Fleas move unseen across the warmth of your body, tiny wanderers that refuse to leave. You scratch idly, then stop. There is no winning this small war. The itch, the bite, the dirt, they are part of you now, woven into the rhythm of existence as surely as your heartbeat. You glance toward your hands. They are no longer the hands of youth. The lines are deep carved by seasons and soil. Calluses bloom like pale armor across your palms, thick and unfeeling. The nails are blackened, cracked half-moons of stubbornness. You rub them together and feel the grain of your own skin, the grit that never fully washes away. In another life, these might have been the hands of a craftsman or a poet. But here they are, tools meant to dig, to lift, to endure. Beside you, the fields lie waiting. Brown and uneven, they stretch beneath the low sky, like a prayer whispered to the earth. You take your hoe, its wooden handle worn smooth by years of grip, and step into the mud. The soil is cold and soft, clinging to your feet, as if reluctant to let go. Each step makes a wet sound like the heartbeat of the land itself. You breathe deeply. The air is sharp and clean, filled with the scent of damp earth and distant fire. You begin to work. The first swing of the hoe bites into the ground with a dull thud. The motion is familiar, an old conversation between your muscles and the soil. You lift, strike, turn, breathe. The rhythm becomes its own kind of music, slow and steady, the song of survival. The sun creeps higher, breaking through the haze in pale fragments. Light glints off the wet furrows, painting them silver for a fleeting moment before the wind steals it away. Your body protests. The ache in your back deepens with each swing. The chill of morning gives way to the slow burn of effort. But you do not stop. You cannot. The land demands its due, and you have learned not to argue. Around you, other figures move in the fields, neighbors' family silhouettes bent in the same posture of endurance. From afar, they look almost peaceful, like part of the landscape itself. As you work, your mind drifts. You think of the pottage simmering back home, of the child who will wait for you at the door, of the small flame that will be lit again tonight. There is comfort in these thoughts, fragile but real. The world may be harsh, but it is predictable. The plow follows the season. The body follows the plow. The rhythm never changes. And maybe that is why you survive, because the cycle, though cruel, is steady. A breeze passes cool against your face. You lift your head and see a woman a few rows away, her shawl pulled tightly around her shoulders. Her face is hidden beneath the fabric, but her movements are sure patient. You know her. Everyone knows everyone here. She hums as she works a low melody that threads through the air like smoke. You don't recognize the song yet. It feels older than any of you, a song passed from one tired heart to another through generations. Her hands move quickly, gathering stalks, binding them into bundles. You watch for a moment. Those hands are small but strong. They bear the same marks as yours, cracked, swollen, alive. Hands that cook, wash, spin, heal. Hands that bury and bless. You wonder if she too feels the endlessness of it all, the weight of days that repeat like a prayer without answer. But then, she lifts her head slightly, and you glimpse her smile, faint, quiet, like a candle sheltered from the wind. In that smile lies the secret to surviving this world. The hours pass. The sun climbs, then begins to fall. Shadows stretch long across the fields. Your arms tremble from the effort, your breath comes heavy. Sweat darkens your tunic, mingling with dirt until you can no longer tell where one ends and the other begins. But there's a strange peace in the exhaustion. It silences the noise of thought. The ache becomes a lullaby of its own, a rhythm that reminds you you're still capable of giving, still needed, still alive. By the time you stop, the light has turned golden, soft, and forgiving. The village hums again in the distance, laughter, barking dogs, the faint clang of iron from the smith's forge. You lean on your hoe and look down at your hands once more. The dirt beneath your nails glows faintly in the dying light, like dust from another world. You flex your fingers and they ache, but they also pulse with warmth. These are not beautiful hands, but they are real. They are the proof of your existence, the record of every task, every wound, every small victory against hunger and despair. You realize that perhaps beauty is not what survives, endurance is. The hands that till the earth cradle a child or light a candle, they are what keep the world from collapsing into silence. The wind grows softer as the sun sinks. You gather your tools and begin the slow walk back to your hut. The smell of smoke greets you before you see it, the promise of warmth and food. Your arms are heavy, your feet sore, but your heart feels strangely light. Each step squelches in the mud like a drumbeat marking the end of another day. When you finally reach your doorway, you pause. The light from inside spills out golden and trembling. You listen faint voices, laughter the sound of a child clapping hands. You smile tired, but genuine. Beneath the itch of wool and the sting of blisters, you feel something quiet, but steady, the sense that in this small, hard world, love still lives in ordinary things. You step inside, leaving the fields behind. The air is thick with the smell of stew and smoke, and for a moment you forget the ache in your back. Someone presses a cup of ale into your hand. The warmth of it seeps through your skin, through your bones, through the calluses that shield you from everything but this simple, fleeting grace. Outside, the night gathers over the village, dark and tender. The fields fade into shadow, the tools rest against the walls. You close your eyes, feeling the softness of exhaustion pull you under. The world hums a quiet song of earth and sweat, of hands and hearts that never stop. And as you drift, you realize that beneath the wool, beneath the calluses, there is still something tender left inside you, something the cold has not taken. Tomorrow the bell will ring again, and you will rise. Chapter 4. When faith keeps you standing. The night has folded itself gently over the village. The fields rest now dark and quiet, and the tools lean wearily against the walls like tired companions. You sleep for a few hours, not deeply, but enough for your body to forget the ache of the day. When the morning bell rings again, you wake not with surprise, but with resignation. The sound feels eternal, like it has always been ringing somewhere for someone. You stretch your muscles stiff, your hands still carrying the ghost of yesterday's work. As the first gray light seeps through the cracks of your hut, you sense the pull of another duty, not to the land, but to the soul. It is Sunday, and the bell that calls today is not for labor, but for faith. You wash your face in cold water that bites your skin awake, then dress in your cleanest tunic, which only means it is the least dirty. Outside, the air smells of smoke and frost, but the world feels softer somehow. The path to the church is narrow and muddy, worn by countless feet that have walked this same way for generations. You join your neighbors, their faces pale in the morning light, their breaths mingling like mist. No one speaks much. There is a quiet reverence in the air, as though the very act of walking toward the church is a kind of prayer. The church stands at the center of the village, small, built of wood and stone, its roof sagging under the weight of years. A simple cross rises from the top, catching the faint light of dawn. As you enter, the scent of beeswax and incense wraps around you, warm and heavy. The floor is uneven, the benches rough. The walls are painted with fading images of saints, whose eyes seem to follow you as you find your place. You bow your head automatically. It doesn't matter if you understand every word that will be spoken. The act itself is what matters. The kneeling, the silence, the surrender. The priest's voice rises from the front, speaking Latin words that most of the villagers cannot translate. Yet no one questions them. They are not meant to be understood. They are meant to be felt. The cadence, the rhythm, the tone all blend together like a chant woven through the air. You close your eyes listening. The sound is both distant and intimate, like rain falling inside a dream. The church is cold, but something within you begins to warm, a small flickering flame that has nothing to do with fire. Outside these walls, the world is unpredictable storms, hunger, sickness, loss. Inside, there is order. There is promise. Here, the pain of life has meaning, even if that meaning is mystery. The priest speaks of salvation, of sin, of a kingdom beyond this one. You picture it a place where hunger is forgotten, where backs do not ache, where children do not die before they learn to walk. You imagine your loved ones, your ancestors standing there in light, their hands no longer rough, their faces at peace. The thought alone is enough to steady you. Around you, others kneel on the stone floor, murmuring prayers that blend into a single low hum. A mother clutches her child to her chest. An old man crosses himself with trembling fingers. You can feel the weight of their hopes, their grief, their need for mercy. And for a moment you realize that this is what faith truly is. Not the certainty of answers, but the courage to keep asking in the dark. The priest lifts the host, and the faint light from the window touches it, turning the small round wafer into a sliver of gold. The congregation bows as one, a forest of bent heads, each one carrying its own secret burden. You bow too, not because you are free of doubt, but because you have nowhere else to place it. In a world where everything is fragile, crops, bodies, hearts, this ritual feels like the only solid ground beneath your feet. The choir begins to sing, though choir is too grand a word for a handful of villagers with cracked voices. Still, their song fills the church like light fills a cup. The melody wobbles, stumbles, but it is beautiful because it tries. You join in quietly, your voice blending with the others, the sound trembling but alive. Each note feels like an offering, small and human. As the Mass continues, you find your mind drifting. You remember the woman in the field yesterday humming while she worked. You remember her quiet smile. Perhaps this too is her song sung here in another form. The same melody of endurance now dressed in sacred words. You glance toward the altar where candles flicker like fragile stars. Their smoke curls upward, disappearing into the rafters. You wonder if prayers travel the same way, rising, vanishing, yet somehow reaching where they need to go. When the service ends, the people rise slowly, their joints creaking, their voices low. The priest moves among them, offering blessings. You watch as a child tugs at his mother's sleeve, asking for bread. She hushes him gently and smiles. Outside, the wind has softened. The bell rings again, not as command, but as release. The congregation spills into the sunlight, blinking as though they've stepped from one world into another. You walk home along the same muddy path, your boots heavy, but your heart lighter. The sky has cleared. A patch of blue opens like a promise. You realize that though nothing has truly changed, the hunger, the cold, the endless work, something within you feels steadier. Perhaps that is enough. Faith doesn't feed the body, but it feeds something deeper, something that keeps you upright when the world bends low. When you reach your hut, the fire has been rekindled. Your child is playing by the doorway, his laughter chasing away the last shadows of doubt. You lift him into your arms, and he giggles, pressing his dirty face against your cheek. You hold him close, and for the first time in a long while, you feel the quiet pulse of gratitude. Maybe that is what prayer truly is, not words, not ritual, but this feeling of being alive, still breathing, still capable of love. You set the child down and look toward the sky. The church bell is silent now, but its echo lingers inside you, a rhythm that matches your own heartbeat. The world outside remains harsh, but faith in its quiet way keeps you standing. It doesn't erase the suffering. It simply teaches you to face it, to endure it, to carry light through the long corridors of darkness. That night, as the fire flickers and the wind hums against the roof, you close your eyes and think of the church, of the candles, the prayers, the voices trembling like leaves in a storm. You whisper one last thank you, not for miracles, but for the strength to keep hoping. And as you drift into sleep, you dream not of heaven, but of dawn, another day, another chance to rise again when the bell calls. Chapter 5. The Shadow of a Woman. When the bell of the church fell silent, its echo lingered not only in the air, but in the hearts of those who had knelt beneath its sound. Days passed, and the rhythm of the village returned work, hunger, prayer, and sleep. Yet something in you remained touched by that quiet faith. You began to notice the people around you differently. The bowed heads, the tired faces, the fragile sparks of hope that refused to die. Among them, one presence stood out, not because she spoke, but because she didn't need to. She was there in every movement of care, in every act that kept the world from collapsing. The woman. The memory of the church still lingers in your chest, the faint smell of wax and incense, the echo of the priest's voice, the feeling of kneeling among strangers who all carried the same quiet sorrow. The bell has long stopped ringing, but its sound remains inside you like a heartbeat. As the days pass, you fall again into the rhythm of work and hunger, of rain and cold, of prayer whispered at dusk. Yet in the corners of this hard world, life continues in another form, soft, steady, unseen. It lives in the figure of a woman moving quietly through the smoke of morning. She wakes before dawn, when the fire has turned to ash. Her breath clouds the air as she stirs the embers, coaxing them back to life with gentle hands. Around her, the hut is dim and still. A child sleeps beneath a coarse blanket. A man snores softly in the corner, too tired from yesterday's work to stir. The woman's world begins in silence. It is not the silence of peace, but of duty, the kind that asks nothing and expects everything. Her fingers move quickly, practiced and sure. She pours water from a clay jar, the sound quiet and rhythmic, like a secret song. The bread from yesterday lies hard on the table, but she softens it with the steam of boiling pottage, adding roots and herbs she gathered the evening before. The air fills with the scent of earth and grain. She moves with the grace of someone who has no choice but to keep moving. Outside, the first light of day slips through the cracks in the wall. She steps out, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. The world is cold and gray, the ground slick with frost. She walks to the well, balancing a wooden bucket in one hand. The air bites at her cheeks, but she doesn't flinch. Her steps are steady, unhurried. The same path, the same duty every morning. When she reaches the well, she looks down into the dark water and sees her reflection, a face lined with years of wind and worry, eyes that have seen too much and been thanked too little. She lowers the bucket and listens to the hollow splash as it touches the surface. Her hands are rough, her nails darkened by earth. She bears the marks of every season, burns from the fire, calluses from spinning wool, cuts from the kitchen knife. Yet there is a beauty in her, not the kind painted in royal halls, but the quiet strength of endurance. Her beauty lives in motion, in care, in persistence. When she lifts the bucket, her arms tremble slightly, but she smiles anyway. It is enough that the water rises. Back in the hut, she wakes her child. The boy's hair is tangled, his face smudged with sleep. She smooths his hair with her fingers, humming softly a tune her mother once sang, and her grandmother before that. It is not a song of joy, but of comfort, a melody meant to remind the living that they are still here. The boy laughs, the sound bright as a bell, and for a moment the room feels lighter. She kisses his forehead and helps him dress her movements tender, despite the weight of exhaustion in her bones. When her husband rises, she hands him a bowl of pottage without a word. He nods, too tired to speak. Their lives are built on this silent understanding: work, eat, survive. Yet behind her quiet eyes lies a world of thought no one will ever see. She dreams sometimes, though she doesn't call them dreams. They come to her in small moments: the feel of sunlight on her face, the sight of birds tracing circles in the sky, the whisper of wind through the thatch. In those moments, she remembers that she is more than her labor. She is a soul wrapped in wool and patience. The other women in the village are the same. They move like shadows between the fields and the fires, between childbirth and burial, between obedience and silence. They speak softly to one another at the well, trading fragments of news, a handful of hope, a laugh too brief to last. They carry the world quietly, as if afraid it might break if they set it down. Some are widows. Some are mothers of too many children. All are bound by the same unspoken vow: to hold what men build, to mend what men break, to keep life alive when life feels impossible. At dusk, when the sky turns the color of old wine, she gathers her shawl and steps outside again. The wind brushes her hair, now streaked with silver. In the distance, she sees her husband returning from the fields, shoulders stooped, clothes heavy with mud. She watches him for a moment, her heart a mixture of love and weariness. Then she turns back to the fire, preparing the evening meal. There is no time for rest, not yet. Later, after the bowl is empty and the child is asleep, she sits by the door and looks out into the dark. The moon has risen, pale, distant, merciful. She folds her hands in her lap, feeling the roughness of her palms against each other. She thinks of her mother's hands, once just as cracked and strong, now buried beneath the earth. She wonders if her daughter, if she ever has one, will bear the same hands. The thought is both sorrow and blessing. Inside the hut, the fire whispers low. Her husband snores again. The child sighs in his dreams. The woman closes her eyes and breathes slowly. She doesn't pray in words, she never learned them. Her prayer is in her breathing, in her quiet gratitude for another day survived, another morning promised. She whispers into the darkness, not to God exactly, but to something older, the spirit of the earth, of the fire, of all the women who came before her. Tomorrow she will rise again, before the bell, before the light. She will stir the embers, carry the water, mend the torn sleeve, soothe the crying child. Her name may never be written, her story never told, but she will remain in the fabric of the world, in every loaf of bread, baked by unseen hands, in every lullaby whispered in the dark. And as the night deepens, her breath falls into the rhythm of sleep. Outside, the moonlight spills through the cracks, painting her face in silver. She does not know it, but she is the quiet heart of her time, the pulse that keeps the world from stopping. In her smallness lives the vastness of all who endure. She will wake again and the world will begin again, and somewhere far beyond her knowing the universe will take note of her silent grace. Chapter 6. The Death and the Resurrection of the Heart. The night has quieted. Inside the small hut, the woman breathes in slow, even rhythm, her body wrapped in sleep. The fire has burned down to a faint red glow, pulsing like a heart that refuses to die. Outside, frost gathers on the rooftops, silvering the world. You listen half awake, half dreaming, and realize that the sound of life in this village, the whispers, the coughs, the shuffling feet, has faded into a deeper silence. It's the kind of silence that arrives before something changes, before something is lost. You feel it in your bones before you understand it. Something is ending. Something is always ending. When dawn comes, the light is dim and heavy. The air feels strange, slower, as if even the sky is mourning. You step outside, and the first thing you notice is the absence of birds. The fields lie still, the smoke from chimneys rising reluctantly. Down the path, a bell tolls, not the church bell that calls for prayer, but a lower, longer sound. You know what it means. Someone has died. Death here is no stranger. It moves through the village quietly, leaving its mark on doorways and hearts alike. You've seen it before in the fields in the winters, in the faces of those who fall asleep and never wake again. Yet every time it comes, it feels different. It feels personal. The villagers gather slowly near the hut where the sound came from. You join them, your steps sinking into the damp earth. No one speaks. Words seem useless before something so ancient. A young mother stands at the doorway, her eyes empty but dry. Inside, a child lies still beneath a blanket too fine for this world. Someone has placed wildflowers near the small body white blooms that tremble with the wind. The air inside the hut smells faintly of bread and sorrow. The priest arrives, his robe swaying with each slow step. He mutters prayers in Latin, the syllables rolling softly through the room like stones dropped into water. You don't understand them, but you feel their weight. Death is a language everyone knows, even when no one speaks it. You watch as the father, his face gray with disbelief, takes the small body into his arms. The child looks as if asleep, cheeks still flushed with the echo of life. Outside, the villagers bow their heads. The church bell begins again, its echo floating across the fields, reaching even the animals who stand silent in their pens. A wind stirs cold, sharp cleansing, and you feel it touch your face, carrying the scent of soil and endings. In this world, death is both cruel and ordinary. It visits often, and no one asks why. There are no doctors here, no healers who can outwit fever or famine. Sometimes it is the plague, sometimes hunger, sometimes simply winter itself, closing its hand around a fragile body. Yet somehow, people go on. They bury their dead and return to the living, not because they forget, but because life insists. Even in grief, the fire must be kept, the bread baked, the animals fed. You follow the small procession toward the edge of the village. The ground there is soft and uneven, a hill where wooden crosses lean at odd angles. The priest leads them, his voice thin against the wind. Behind him, the mother walks slowly, clutching the edge of her shawl as if holding herself together. The father stumbles once, but the others catch him. No one lets go. Here grief is not private. It belongs to everyone. They lay the child in the earth, the blanket wrapped tight around the body, the flowers resting on top, like whispered apologies. The soil falls in muted rhythm, one handful after another. When the last clump settles, the priest makes the sign of the cross and the bell stops. For a long moment, no one moves. The world seems to hold its breath. Then the mother bends down, presses her palm to the ground, and closes her eyes. She says nothing, but the gesture speaks louder than any prayer. That night, the village feels different. The air carries the echo of the funeral, a weight that presses gently but persistently on every heart. You sit by the fire watching the flames flicker. The woman beside you, the same one whose hands shaped the morning, whose voice soothed the crying child, sits quietly sewing by the light of the fire. Her face is calm, but her eyes are distant, reflecting something you cannot name. After a while, she speaks softly, almost to herself. "We live," she says, "because they no longer can." Her words hang in the air like smoke. You don't answer, but you understand. Later, when you lie down, the sounds of the night return: the creak of wood, the murmur of the wind, the faint crying of an infant somewhere nearby. Life has already resumed, relentless and tender. You stare at the ceiling, tracing the shadows that dance in the firelight, and think about how fragile everything is. How easily warmth turns to cold laughter, to silence, breath, to stillness. And yet something inside you refuses to despair. Perhaps it is faith. Perhaps it is love. Or perhaps it is that strange, stubborn spark that humans carry, the one that whispers, even in grief, "We are not finished yet." In the days that follow, the world begins to move again. The mother whose child is gone returns to the well, her movements slower but sure. The villagers greet her with nods, not pity. No one speaks of the loss. They speak to her as if she is whole. It is their way of helping her stay alive. She smiles, once a small, fragile smile, but real. You see it and realize something profound: life never truly stops. It bends, it breaks, it heals. Like the earth after winter, it finds a way to bloom again. One evening, as the sun sinks low, you walk past the hill where the small grave lies. The air smells of rain, and wildflowers sway gently among the stones. You stop for a moment and listen. The bell from the church rings in the distance, not for death this time, but for evening prayer. The same sound that once mourned now blesses. You close your eyes and let it wash over you. The heart of the village beats on even when it breaks. The woman by the fire hums again. The child's laughter you once heard in the morning returns in another house, another life. The seasons turn, the fields grow, the world heals itself in silence. And you, standing there in the soft light, understand that death too is part of the rhythm, not the end of the song, but a pause between notes. You bow your head and whisper a small prayer, not of sorrow, but of gratitude. For every soul that leaves, another rises to take its place. For every silence, another breath. For every ending, a beginning waiting quietly beneath the soil. And as the wind carries your words away, you feel something shift within you. A stillness, a peace, a quiet faith that maybe, just maybe, the heart of the world never truly stops beating. Chapter 7. The Woman Who Changed an Empire. The days pass softly after the funeral. The air grows warmer, and the fields begin to breathe again. The bell no longer tolls for sorrow, but for work, for prayer, for life. You see the same woman tending the fire, her face quiet, her heart still steady, and you think of all those like her women who hold up the world without ever being seen. Yet somewhere far away in another land, where snow glitters like glass, and palaces rise above frozen rivers, another woman stirs from the shadows of her own silence. She too will hold up a world, but hers will not be a village. Hers will be an empire. The sound of hooves against cobblestone replaces the whisper of the plow. The air is sharper, the wind colder. It smells of iron and ambition. You are no longer among thatched roofs and humble fields. You are in Russia. The year is 1744, and a young woman from Prussia has just arrived at the court of St. Petersburg. Her name is Sophie Friederike Auguste von Anhalt-Zerbst. But soon she will be known by another Catherine. She steps down from the carriage, her breath forming clouds in the icy air. Snowflakes land on her dark hair, melt against her flushed cheeks. Around her the palace looms grand and foreign. Inside its walls her fate has already been decided. She will marry the Grand Duke Peter heir to the Russian throne. She is 17. She speaks little Russian. She has no power, no friends. But her eyes, wide, blue, unflinching, betray something stronger than fear. They hold the same quiet endurance you once saw in the woman by the fire, only sharper, more awake. The court is a cage of whispers and mirrors. Gold glitters on every surface, but the air smells faintly of decay, of secrets dressed in silk. Servants bow, courtiers smile too widely, and somewhere in the corridors alliances are already forming like frost. Catherine moves through it all with careful grace. She listens more than she speaks. At night, while others feast and gossip, she reads by candlelight Voltaire, Montesquieu, Plutarch. Words become her refuge, her secret weapon. She copies entire pages by hand until her fingers cramp. In a place where truth is dangerous, knowledge becomes her armor. Her marriage to Peter is cold from the beginning. He is careless, childish, obsessed with soldiers and toy battles, more boy than man. His laughter cuts through the halls like a blade dulled by madness. He mocks her accent, ignores her kindness, spends his nights drinking and his days dreaming of Prussia, the country she left behind. Still, Catherine endures. She smiles when she must, kneels when required. But inside she is learning about power, about patience, about the quiet art of survival. There are nights when she lies awake listening to the wind claw at the palace windows. She remembers her mother's voice from far away telling her that a woman's strength lies not in her words, but in her silence. Yet Catherine knows better now. Silence is not submission. It is a waiting room for destiny. The years unfold and Russia changes. The empress dies. The throne passes to Peter and the empire trembles. His foolishness turns the court against him. Catherine, watching from the shadows, feels history turning in her direction. The people begin to whisper her name softly, carefully, as if speaking a prayer. The soldiers, the nobles, the clergy, they all begin to look at her with new eyes. She who once had nothing now carries within her the calm of one who understands that the moment has arrived. It is a night of thunder and candlelight when she finally acts.
The corridors smell of wax and fear. A horse waits in the courtyard. Catherine mounts it with a steadiness that surprises even her.
The wind catches her cloak as she rides through the streets, her soldiers behind her. For Russia they cry. She says nothing. Her silence commands more than any speech. By dawn the city belongs to her. Peter flees, betrayed by his own recklessness, and soon after he is gone, dead by decree or fate, no one knows for sure. The crown rests on Catherine's head, gleaming in the pale light of morning. She is 24. Her reign begins not with celebration, but with a quiet inhale, the kind you take before a storm. Yet beneath the steel of her rule lies something you recognize, the same thread that ran through the woman in the village, the same stubborn heartbeat that refused to stop. Catherine will change the world not by cruelty, but by clarity. Years pass. The empire expands like a great breath drawn by the earth itself. Catherine learns to wield power with both grace and precision. She reforms schools, rewrites laws, opens libraries. She reads the philosophers of the Enlightenment and writes to them as equals. Voltaire calls her the Star of the North. Diderot, upon meeting her, weeps and says she has the mind of a man and the heart of a mother. She smiles politely, knowing both are meant as compliments and insults. But even as the empire thrives, loneliness creeps in. Power is cold company. Catherine walks the marble halls of her palace at night, the sound of her steps echoing like rain. She passes portraits of kings and conquerors, men who built nations through fire and sword. She wonders if they ever felt as she does now, trapped between greatness and isolation. The snow falls quietly outside, and she presses her hand against the window pane, feeling the chill. "I am both prisoner and queen," she whispers. Yet when dawn comes, she rises again. Her duties call, and she answers. She meets ambassadors, signs decrees, listens to petitions. She smiles for the painters who will immortalize her face. They capture her in gold and crimson, her expression serene, her gaze steady. But none of them paint the truth. The sleepless eyes, the fragile pulse beneath the jewels. The woman who once was. Sophie reading by candlelight, dreaming of a different world. And still she endures. The same way the woman in the village endures. The same way the mother buried her child and kept living. Through fire, through loss, through solitude. Catherine carries within her the ancient rhythm of humanity itself, the unbreakable will to continue. One evening, as she stands on the balcony of the Winter Palace, the Neva River below her shines like liquid glass. The air is sharp and cold. She closes her eyes and breathes deeply, and in that breath is the memory of every woman who came before her, those who prayed, those who worked, those who ruled. For a moment, she feels them all standing beside her, invisible but real, holding up the world, as they always have. The snow begins to fall again, each flake a whisper from another time. Catherine tilts her head toward the sky, her lips parting in something like a smile. She does not know yet that history will call her the Great. She only knows that she must keep the flame alive for her people, for her empire, for the nameless women whose strength beats quietly beneath her crown. And so, in the stillness of that Russian night, she whispers what every woman before her has known: endurance is its own kind of power. Chapter 8. The Marriage of Ice and Fire. The snow still falls gently over the empire. The image of Catherine standing on her balcony remains in your mind, a woman wrapped in silence, her breath visible in the frozen air, her heart burning beneath layers of silk and gold. You remember the glint in her eyes, not of ambition, but of quiet defiance. Yet even queens are born of the same clay as villagers, and even power cannot soften the ache of loneliness. As you drift from that Russian night into the next chapter of her life, the warmth of fire meets the sharpness of ice, and the story of her marriage begins. Long before the crown touched her brow, before the name Catherine carried the weight of greatness, she was simply a young woman trapped in a union colder than the Neva River in midwinter. Her husband Peter was a prince in title, but a stranger in soul. He loved his soldiers more than his wife, his bottles more than his duty, and his childish games more than the woman fate had placed beside him. At the heart of a gilded palace, Catherine lived in exile, a prisoner in her own chambers, surrounded by laughter that wasn't hers. The marriage was not of love, nor even of choice. It was a bargain struck between nations, a piece of political chess that left her stranded between two worlds: Prussia, which she had left behind, and Russia, which had yet to accept her. At first, she tried to be the perfect wife, obedient and graceful. She smiled when he ignored her, stayed silent when he mocked her. But inside her spirit, the same one that had survived years of court suspicion and the cruel indifference of fate, began to awaken. Each day became a test of endurance. Catherine learned to mask her pain with stillness, to let the silence speak for her. While Peter reveled in childish fantasies of parades and toy soldiers, she studied philosophy, history, and politics. The more he stumbled into immaturity, the more she grew into wisdom. She realized that real power, was not taken by noise or rage. It was taken by patience, by waiting until the world forgot you were waiting. At night, the palace grew quiet, and Catherine would wander through the long corridors, her footsteps echoing softly against marble floors. The portraits of past rulers watched her with painted eyes, some proud, some sorrowful, some mocking. She often stopped before a particular painting of Peter the Great, the man who had carved a nation from wilderness. He made Russia strong, she would whisper. Perhaps one day I will make it wise. Those were dangerous thoughts, but they kept her alive. Her heart, though wounded, was not without tenderness. She found moments of warmth in friendships with women of the court, in letters from thinkers who treated her as an equal, and in the innocent laughter of servants' children who played in the courtyards. Once she knelt beside one such child who had fallen on the ice and helped him up, brushing snow from his cheeks. "You must learn to fall gracefully," she said with a smile. The boy looked up at her and whispered, "Like a queen." She laughed softly. "Not yet," she said, "but one day." Peter, meanwhile, sank deeper into his own shadow. His temper grew unpredictable, his words cruel. He paraded mistresses through the palace, flaunting them like trophies, each one emptier than the last. Catherine endured it all with a composure that frightened him. Her silence was too calm, her eyes too knowing. He once accused her of witchcraft, claiming her gaze froze the air. But what truly froze him was the quiet realization that she no longer feared him. Their nights together became a battlefield of cold glances and unsaid words. She slept facing the window, her back to him, her breath clouding the glass. He would mutter curses under his breath, and she would close her eyes, thinking of books of the future of freedom. It was in those long, lonely hours that Catherine began to understand herself, that love, though sacred, could not be the foundation of her destiny. What she sought was not affection but purpose. Still, she knew the cost of ambition in a world ruled by men. Every smile, every gesture had to be measured, every thought hidden behind a mask of gentleness. The court was a nest of serpents, and one wrong word could mean ruin. Yet Catherine learned to dance among them not with deception, but with grace. She turned their curiosity into her armor, their gossip into her disguise. The men saw her as harmless, the women saw her as patient. Neither saw the fire quietly building behind her calm expression. Outside the palace, the empire groaned under the weight of hunger and war. Peasants toiled in frozen fields while nobles argued over silk. News of uprisings reached the capital like the first tremors of an approaching storm. Catherine listened, absorbing every detail, every injustice. And in the privacy of her chambers, she wrote essays, reflections, plans. Not as a queen, not yet, but as a woman preparing to heal a wounded world. One winter evening, Peter burst into her room, his face red with drink. "You think you are better than me?" he shouted, slamming his fist against the table. She looked at him quietly, her hands folded. "No," she said softly, "but I think Russia deserves better than both of us." Her words cut through him like ice. He stormed out, leaving her alone with the echo of her own courage. That night, Catherine went to the balcony. The snow fell in thick, whispering sheets. She raised her hand, catching a single flake before it melted on her skin. This, she thought, is what power feels like, cold, fleeting, yet infinite in its patience. Somewhere deep inside, the idea of revolution took root. It would not bloom yet, but she would nurture it quietly with the same care a mother gives to a sleeping child. Days turned into years. The marriage remained an empty shell, a relic of duty and deceit. Yet from within that frost, Catherine forged something indestructible. She learned that strength was not born in battlefields or palaces, but in hearts that refused to break. She began as a girl frozen by circumstance, but with each passing season she thawed into a woman of flame. And when the time came when the empire began to tremble and history leaned toward her name, she did not rise with vengeance, she rose with purpose. The marriage of ice and fire had done its work. It had burned away illusion, hardened her resolve, and shaped her into the ruler she was meant to be. As the candlelight flickers against her face, she whispers to herself the truth she has come to know. Even in the coldest marriage, a soul can still find warmth, and with that, Catherine, the young woman who once arrived in Russia with nothing, stands ready to claim everything. Chapter 9. The Empress of Light. The fire of Catherine's courage still glows from the ashes of that frozen marriage. You can almost see her again standing by the window, a single candle flickering against the snow. Her face calm but illuminated by something deeper, the light of purpose. The years have turned, the seasons have changed, and what began as endurance has now become destiny. From the shadows of cold halls, from the silence of an unhappy union, Catherine rises no longer the young wife of a prince, but the empress of her own making. When the crown touches her head for the first time, it is not triumph that floods her heart, but stillness. The church bells of St. Petersburg ring like thunder, their echoes rolling across the Neva River, and the city trembles under the weight of change. She feels the eyes of her people upon her soldiers, nobles, servants, even the poor standing beyond the palace gates, all watching, waiting, believing that she will be different. And she intends to be. She stands before her mirror in the royal chamber that evening, still dressed in her coronation gown, its gold thread catching the light of 1,000 candles. For a moment, she studies herself. The same face that once hid behind fear now holds the calm of resolve. Power, she realizes, is not something that crowns give. It is something that grows quietly inside those who refuse to surrender. She smiles faintly, almost shyly, as if meeting herself for the first time. Her first decree as empress is not one of punishment or war, but of learning. A nation, she writes, cannot rise if its people remain in darkness. She orders schools to be built, libraries to be opened, and laws to be rewritten, so that even the poorest child might one day read. When the old advisors protest, claiming that peasants are meant to work, not to think, she replies softly, then they will work with wisdom, not blindness. Her voice never needs to shout. It cuts through arrogance like a blade through silk. Catherine becomes a student of her own empire. She travels through villages and farms, disguised in simple clothes, listening to her people. They greet her with awe and suspicion, unsure of this woman who dares to ask questions. She kneels beside them, touches their rough hands, and feels the pulse of the nation she now carries. "You are Russia," she tells an old farmer once. He stares at her confused. "Me?" he asks. She smiles. "Yes, you." That night, when she returns to her carriage, her eyes are wet. Greatness, she realizes, is not measured in palaces, but in the hearts of those who endure. In the years that follow, her intellect becomes her most feared weapon. She reads philosophers by the light of dawn and writes to them by dusk. Voltaire, far away in France, calls her the miracle of the North. Diderot sends her pages of his encyclopedia, which she reads as if they were love letters to knowledge itself. Reason, she tells her court, is not an enemy of faith, it is its mirror. Yet even as she embraces enlightenment, she never forgets the roots of her people's faith. She knows that light, to be true, must not blind but guide. But power, like winter, has a cruel patience. It tests it, tempts it, isolates. Catherine's advisors turn into rivals. Her victories invite envy. Each decree she signs is both a promise and a challenge. Sometimes in the quiet of night, she wonders if she has simply traded one kind of prison for another, the cage of marriage for the cage of empire. The walls are grander now, the chains invisible, but the loneliness is the same. Yet every morning she rises before the sun, wraps herself in her robe, and steps onto the balcony to breathe the cold air. "Endure," she whispers to herself. "Always endure." Her strength lies not in conquest, but in creation. She commissions artists, architects, and poets to give her people beauty. The Hermitage Museum is born from her longing to fill the silence with meaning. Room by room, it grows a sanctuary for art, for ideas, for the voice of the human soul. When she walks its halls, she feels surrounded by her truest allies, the painted faces of thinkers and dreamers who whisper across centuries, reminding her that wisdom is the only immortality worth seeking. Yet even the greatest lights cast shadows. Rebellion brews in the distance in villages where hunger is stronger than loyalty. The Pugachev uprising rises like smoke from the South peasants demanding freedom. Soldiers turning against the throne. Catherine hears of towns burning, of priests executed of her name, cursed in the streets. The empire trembles, but she does not. The storm has come, she says calmly. Then I shall be the mountain. She rides at the head of her army, not in armor, but in dignity. When the rebellion is crushed, she does not gloat. Instead, she kneels before a wounded soldier and says quietly, "Even in victory, we must weep." The years flow like the Neva itself, wide, relentless, unstoppable. Catherine grows older, wiser, lonelier. She loves and loses trusts and forgives commands and creates. She learns that ruling is not about domination, but about understanding a lesson most men never learn. Once when asked what keeps her awake at night, she replies, "The thought that somewhere a child is still hungry." Her reign transforms Russia from a land of suspicion to a beacon of art and intellect. But it is not the palaces or treaties that define her. It is the way she listens to philosophers, to farmers, to the silence between them. In that silence, she finds her faith renewed not in God or men, but in the capacity of the human spirit to grow toward light, even in the coldest winter. As she walks through her palace gardens one autumn evening, the leaves drift down in gold and crimson waves. She pauses, watching them fall, and remembers the young girl who once arrived here frightened and alone. She wonders what that girl would think of the woman she has become. Perhaps she would be proud. Perhaps she would be tired. Perhaps both. The air grows still. The sun sinks low, painting the sky in soft rose and amber. Catherine closes her eyes and lets the light touch her face. "Let it be said," she murmurs, "that I was not born into power. I learned it one heartbreak at a time. And as the last rays fade, you feel the warmth of that truth linger in the air, the warmth of a woman who carried the light of wisdom through centuries of darkness, not to blind, but to guide those who would follow." Chapter 10. Red as blood, red as dawn. The glow of Catherine's empire fades slowly like the dying embers of a fire. Her vision, her courage, and her loneliness drift away into the folds of time, leaving behind only the quiet hum of history. You can almost hear the last echo of her footsteps in the marble halls, mingling with the sigh of the Russian wind. But history, like a river, never stops flowing. As you follow its current, the cold of the north begins to warm. The snow melts into red soil. The white light of palaces gives way to the orange shimmer of torches burning in a jungle far from Europe. You are leaving the age of reason behind, stepping now into the world of myth, a world where red is not the color of power, but of eternity. The jungle breathes around you, alive, dense whispering. The air is thick with the scent of rain and earth, the hum of insects, the distant call of unseen birds. You find yourself standing before an ancient stone temple, half swallowed by roots, its walls painted with faded murals of gods and serpents. The year is no longer 1700 or 1800. Time has become circular here, infinite. Beneath your feet lies Palenque, the ancient city of the Maya. And somewhere within its heart sleeps a woman whose story is written not in books, but in the color red. It was 1994 when archaeologists, guided by instinct and faith, uncovered a tomb buried beneath a temple known as the Temple of the Inscriptions. They expected bones dust, perhaps a few fragments of pottery. What they found instead left them breathless, a chamber shimmering in red. The walls, the floor, even the bones themselves were covered in a fine powder of cinnabar, a mineral once used in rituals of life and death. And there in the center lay the skeleton of a woman, her skull adorned with a jade mask, her body surrounded by offerings of obsidian seashells and pearls. She was called La Reina Roja, the Red Queen. No one knew her name yet. Her presence was undeniable. The color red clung to everything, staining stone and air alike. It was as if the centuries themselves had been painted in her memory. The scientists believed the cinnabar was used to preserve her remains, but the villagers who came to see the tomb whispered another story, that the red was not paint, but life. The blood of the gods mingled with her own. The Red Queen had slept for over 1,000 years, but even in death she ruled. The carvings on the temple walls told of rituals of celestial battles, of the eternal dance between the sun and the moon. Some said she was the wife of Pakal the Great, the most legendary of Maya kings. Others believed she was a priestess, a seer, a woman chosen by the gods to bridge the worlds of the living and the dead. No inscription revealed her identity. Only silence heavy and sacred. Imagine her a woman lying beneath the earth, her bones wrapped in crimson dust, her jewels gleaming faintly in the torchlight. Once she must have walked among her people, her voice commanding and calm. She must have known the rhythm of rain, the smell of maize, the sacred heartbeat of drums echoing across the jungle at night. Perhaps she stood beside her king, her hair crowned with jade, watching the stars rise like prayers. Perhaps she led rituals by firelight, her hands raised to the heavens, her face painted in red, the color of sacrifice but also of rebirth. In every civilization, there are women like her, unseen, unnamed, yet essential. Their stories are not written in ink, but in endurance. The Red Queen's body may have turned to dust, but her spirit endures through the mystery she left behind. As you stand in that tomb surrounded by red walls that shimmer in the glow of your lantern, you can almost feel her breathing, not with lungs, but with memory. She is not gone. She is merely sleeping within the earth, waiting for the world to remember her. The archaeologists carefully lift her mask, revealing the delicate bones beneath. They take samples, measure, photograph. They speak in scientific language, carbon dating, isotopic analysis, preservation. But beneath their calm professionalism, you sense reverence. They do not merely study her, they commune with her. One of them, a young woman, kneels before the skeleton and whispers, "We've found you." The others fall silent. In that moment, the air feels charged, as if time itself is holding its breath. Outside, the jungle stirs. A warm rain begins to fall, and with it, the scent of flowers, sharp, sweet, and ancient. The red dust on the archaeologists' hands begins to mix with the water, staining their fingers, as if the queen herself is touching them, marking them. You imagine her spirit rising, not as a ghost, but as a presence woven into the rain, into the leaves, into the endless hum of life that never truly ends. In the fading light, the temple seems to come alive. The carvings shimmer as if retelling her story. In flashes, the moon goddess descending to earth, the sun god burning through darkness, the sacred marriage of life and death. Red, always red, for blood, for love, for the heart that never stops beating. Centuries may pass, but the meaning remains. The Red Queen's tomb is not a monument to death, but to continuity, the eternal rhythm of beginning again. Her color, her mystery, her silence. They all speak of one truth that transcends language and empire, that life and death are not enemies, but lovers forever entwined. As night settles over Palenque, the archaeologists pack their tools and leave the temple in respectful silence. The torches fade, but the red walls still glow faintly in the dark, as if lit from within. Somewhere beyond the trees, thunder rolls. The jungle exhales. And for a moment you think you hear a whisper not from the wind, but from her. A voice without sound saying, "Remember me, not for how I died, but for how I remained." You step out into the rain, and the drops fall warm against your skin. They streak down your arms like lines of paint red in the light of the setting sun. And as you walk away, you understand that the color is not a warning, but a promise. That from the dust of every fallen queen, every forgotten woman, dawn will always rise again, red as blood, red as hope, red as the beginning of everything. Chapter 11. The Jade Mask and the Immortal Heart. The rain that fell over Palenque has not stopped. It lingers in your memory like a pulse, a soft drumming upon the leaves. You can still see the crimson dust of the Red Queen's tomb glowing faintly in the light of torches, as though her spirit refused to be forgotten. But as the archaeologists left the temple and the jungle swallowed their footprints, another presence began to stir. The story of the Red Queen does not end in her resting place. It begins there in the silence between her bones and the jade mask that hides her eternal face. Centuries pass in the blink of an eye. The jungle grows, the rivers shift, the temples crumble and rise again under the patient hand of the earth. The tomb lies quiet, sealed once more, and yet something remains awake within it. It is said that the spirit of the Red Queen still breathes through the soil, not haunting, but remembering. And sometimes when the moon is high and the air is thick with mist, a faint green shimmer appears where the temple meets the roots. Some say it is the reflection of stars. Others say it is her, the glow of jade alive again. Imagine her mask, carved from the purest jade, smoothed by hands that understood eternity. Each piece cut to fit the curve of her face, each fragment joined by threads of gold. When the archaeologists first lifted it from her skull, they described it as the color of life made stone. The eyes formed from obsidian seemed to look back at them calm and unyielding. That gaze has haunted scholars ever since. It is not the gaze of death. It is the gaze of someone who knows something the living do not. That existence is circular, not linear. That what dies always returns. In the old language of the Maya, jade was more than a gem. It was breath, the stone of life, the essence of the gods. Warriors wore it into battle for courage. Kings carried it into the afterlife for protection. To be buried with jade was to be promised immortality. And so the Red Queen's mask was not an ornament, but a key, a passage between realms. With it, she became not a corpse, but a guardian. Scientists have analyzed her remains, debating her origins. Some claim she was the wife of Pakal the Great, the Sun King of Palenque. Others believe she was his mother, the queen who guided him through visions of the divine. A few think she was neither, that she was a priestess, a vessel through which gods spoke to men. But the truth may be simpler and more sacred. She was a woman who refused to vanish. When they reconstructed her face using technology, the image that emerged was delicate, strong, and strangely familiar. Her cheekbones high, her lips set in calm determination. She looked not like a distant queen, but like someone you might pass in a crowded street, timeless, resilient, watching the world move forward without her. The scientists called her the Eternal Woman, though perhaps she would have preferred no name at all. There is a story whispered by the elders of Chiapas that long before her tomb was opened, a little girl from the nearby village used to dream of a woman dressed in red. The woman would appear in her sleep, her skin shining with light, her eyes dark as night. "Do not forget me," the woman would say, "for I have never forgotten you." When the news broke that a royal tomb had been found, the girl now grown claimed she already knew who slept beneath the temple. She was waiting, she said. She just needed to be seen again. The power of the Red Queen lies not in her mystery, but in her endurance. In every culture, in every time, women like her hold the world together in silence. They live in the spaces between history's sentences, in the breaths that follow tragedy, in the hands that rebuild after ruin. The Red Queen may have ruled an empire once, or she may have simply tended the fires of faith, but her legacy is clear. She is the embodiment of what cannot die, the pulse of creation itself. Her jade mask is not just an artifact. It is a reflection of humanity, of endurance, of the beauty that survives decay. Look closely, and you may see your own reflection within its polished surface. You may see the mother who raised you, the grandmother who prayed for you, the woman who worked until her hands cracked but never stopped giving. Her story is their story, and their story is yours. The archaeologists say that when they placed the mask under light, the room filled with an emerald glow. For a moment it felt like the air was breathing. One of them described a sudden warmth, as if the tomb itself exhaled after 1,000 years of holding its breath. No one spoke. In that silence, they realized they were not studying death. They were standing in the presence of life that refused to end. In ancient Maya belief, the color red symbolized the east, the direction of birth of dawn. Jade, on the other hand, belonged to the heart. Together they formed the perfect balance, blood and spirit, earth and sky. The Red Queen, wrapped in red and crowned in jade, was both the mother of beginnings, the soul of renewal. And so her legend continues, carried not by conquest, but by color. The red dust still clings to the walls of her chamber, bright as ever. The jade mask still rests in its glass case, untouched by time. Visitors come from far away to stand before it, to feel the weight of her gaze. Some walk away with chills, others with tears. All of them, in some unspoken way, feel changed. For when you look upon that mask, you are not looking at death, but at the persistence of being, the quiet defiance of life that will not bow, will not fade, will not surrender to silence. Outside, the rain begins to ease. The jungle hums again, alive and endless. And if you listen closely, you might hear the whisper of a queen who never truly left her kingdom. Her voice is soft but strong, carried by wind and memory. The body ends, but the heart remembers. The sound fades into the night, leaving behind only the rustle of leaves and the rhythm of your own breath. The ancient reminder that everything, even loss, is part of a greater pulse. The Red Queen sleeps, but her spirit keeps watch, her jade mask gleaming like the promise of dawn that forever follows the dark. Chapter 12. Two moons over Palenque. The rain fades slowly, leaving behind a breathless hush. The jade mask still gleams faintly in your memory, its eyes eternal and unblinking. You can almost feel the warmth of the earth beneath the temple, the faint pulse that seemed to echo through the red dust, as though the heart of the Red Queen still beat within the soil. But this story, like all things sacred, is not meant to end where it began. For nearby, beneath another temple, bathed in the same ancient silence, lies the body of a king. His name is Pakal, the great son of Palenque. And together, he and the Red Queen form the two halves of one divine story, the eternal dance of the sun and the moon. In the light of dawn, the jungle awakens again. Mist curls between the trees like threads of forgotten prayers. The cries of parrots echo through the canopy, and the scent of wet stone rises from the earth. The Temple of the Inscriptions stands tall, weathered, but unbroken. Beneath its steps lies another chamber, the resting place of Pakal the Great, whose sarcophagus tells a story not of death, but of flight. Carved upon its lid is the image of the king ascending into the heavens, his body surrounded by symbols of stars and roots, life and resurrection. When archaeologists first opened Pakal's tomb in the 1950s, they found the same red dust that would later surround the Red Queen. Cinnabar, the color of blood of birth of divine transformation. His bones, like hers, had been laid to rest with offerings of jade and shells, tokens of the world that lives beneath and above. It was as if both king and queen were sleeping on opposite sides of the same heartbeat, awaiting the moment when their stories would meet again. The Maya did not see death as an ending. They believed it was a passage, a door, through which the soul walked to reach the other side of the sky. The sun itself was proof, dying each evening, reborn each morning. In that endless rhythm, Pakal was the sun descending into the underworld, to bring light to its shadows, while the Red Queen was the moon, his eternal companion guiding the lost with her pale reflection. Two orbits, two destinies circling forever around the same divine truth, that love does not end with time. It only changes form. In the local tongue, the moon is called Ixchel, the mother goddess of healing and fertility. The people of Palenque once believed that every queen carried a spark of Ixchel within her. To rule was to nurture. To speak was to heal. And so the Red Queen became her earthly reflection, the feminine balance to Pakal's fire. Where he commanded armies and built temples, she tended the altars, lit the sacred fires, and prayed for rain. He ruled the day. She ruled the dream. Now, centuries later, when you stand before their tombs, you can feel that ancient equilibrium humming through the air. The Red Queen rests in her sea of red, her bones wrapped in the glow of cinnabar. Pakal lies beneath his carved stone, the imagery of stars surrounding him like a map to eternity. Between them, unseen but palpable, flows the same energy, the current of creation itself. Some scholars argue that the two were never meant to be linked, that their tombs were separated by time and purpose. But others, guided by intuition more than evidence, insist that they were bound not by history but by something greater. They point to the way their burial sites align perfectly with the movement of the sun and moon across the Palenque horizon. On certain nights, the moon rises directly over her temple, while the last rays of the sun fade over his. It is as if the heavens themselves bear witness to their reunion, the two lights sharing the sky for one brief moment before drifting apart again. In the soft glow of that cosmic balance, you begin to understand why the ancient Maya built temples like poems carved stones, like prayers. They believed that beauty was the bridge between worlds. The Red Queen's mask and Pakal's sarcophagus were not monuments to mortality. They were declarations of faith, faith that even when bodies turn to dust, meaning remains. There is a legend told by the elders of the nearby village of Santo Domingo. They say that once every 100 years, when the night is still and the stars form a path above Palenque, two lights rise from the jungle, one golden, one red. The golden light ascends first steady and proud. The red follows slow and graceful, weaving around it like a veil of smoke. Together they spiral into the sky, then fade into dawn. It is the king and his queen, the elders whisper. He brings the day, she brings the dream. And perhaps that is what we all are, fragments of sunlight and moonlight caught between earth and sky, each searching for the one who makes us whole. The story of Pakal and the Red Queen is not just about rulers or tombs or lost empires. It is about harmony, the eternal balance of life and death, strength and tenderness, fire and reflection. As you walk through the ruins of Palenque, the jungle begins to sing. Cicadas hum like distant drums. The wind brushes through the trees, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and ancient smoke. You feel the weight of time soften. The world around you is both alive and dreaming. The stones seem to breathe. And in that breath, you sense the presence of those who came before, not as ghosts, but as light. The moon rises over the temple once more, a pale mirror of the sun that has set. Its glow spills gently over the carvings, tracing the shapes of gods and kings of serpents and flowers of lovers who refused to be forgotten. The air hums with quiet reverence. You close your eyes and see them, the king and the queen, standing side by side, their faces serene, their hands almost touching. They do not speak. They do not need to. Above them the sky holds two lights, one golden, one white, and the space between them shimmers like breath. The night deepens, but it does not feel like darkness. It feels like rest. It feels like balance. And as the jungle folds itself back into silence, the world seems to whisper the lesson of their story, that the sun may fall and the moon may wane, but love in its truest form never fades. It only changes the shape of its light. Chapter 13. The Girl Named Frida. The two lights above Palenque fade into the dawn, one gold, one white, vanishing into the slow rhythm of another day. The jungle grows still again, its heart returning to silence. Yet the echo of the Red Queen and her king lingers in your mind, that delicate balance of strength and tenderness, of endurance and grace. As the mist lifts, time begins to shift once more. The red of cinnabar turns into another red, the red of passion, of blood, of paint upon canvas. The sound of drums becomes the rumble of streetcars. The scent of earth transforms into turpentine, and the whisper of the jungle turns into the heartbeat of a modern city. The year is 1925, and somewhere in Mexico, a young girl named Frida Kahlo opens her eyes to pain and to destiny. The air in Coyoacan is bright with sunlight and noise. Bougainvillea spills over the walls in cascades of pink and purple, and the laughter of children echoes down the dusty streets. In a small blue house with white-framed windows, Frida lies in her bed, her dark brows furrowed in pain. The smell of disinfectant clings to the air. Her mother hums softly in the corner the tune More Prayer Than Lullaby. Outside, the world continues as though nothing extraordinary has happened. But for Frida, everything has changed. Just weeks earlier, she had been a spirited 17-year-old full of wit and rebellion. She dreamed of becoming a doctor, of studying the human body not as a patient, but as a scientist. But one September afternoon, fate shifted its weight. The bus she was riding collided with a streetcar. Metal and glass tore through her body. A handrail pierced her abdomen, breaking her spine, her ribs, her legs. She was pulled from the wreckage covered in blood and gold dust, a strange mixture of horror and beauty, as if life itself could not decide whether to destroy her or anoint her. Now she lies in her room encased in plaster and pain. Her body refuses to move. Her bones scream with every breath. The days pass slowly, each hour stretching into an eternity. The ceiling becomes her sky, her cell, her mirror. Yet within that stillness, something begins to stir. Not bitterness, not despair, but a quiet curiosity. She asks her father for a mirror to be placed above her bed. And when she looks into it, she does not see a victim. She sees a challenge. Frida begins to paint. Her father brings her brushes and pigments. Her mother fashions a special easel that rests on her bed. The first strokes are hesitant, trembling with pain. But soon her hand steadies. She paints what she knows best herself, not out of vanity, but necessity. I paint myself, she will later say, because I am the subject I know best. The face in the mirror becomes her companion, her confessor, her test of truth. Each color she lays upon the canvas is an act of defiance, each image a declaration that though her body is broken, her soul is not. Her paintings are raw and unflinching. They show her scars, her tears, her strange beauty. In one, her spine becomes a shattered column. In another, her body blooms into flowers that bleed. There are no saints or myths here, only honesty carved in color. She paints her pain until it becomes art, and her art becomes a form of healing. In a world that pities weakness, Frida learns to turn suffering into strength. Time moves forward. The plaster cast comes off, but the pain never leaves. She learns to walk again, though every step feels like defiance. The girl who once dreamed of medicine now studies the anatomy of emotion. Her palette becomes her body, her brush a heartbeat. Her paintings grow bolder, stranger, filled with symbols that confuse critics and move hearts. Some call them surreal, but she insists I never paint dreams. I paint my reality. It is during one of her exhibitions in Mexico City that she meets Diego Rivera, a muralist whose art covers the walls of public buildings, whose fame is as immense as his presence. He is 20 years older, heavyset, brilliant, and flawed. He sees her paintings and tells her, "You have truth in your hands." She smiles and replies, "You have lies in yours, but they're beautiful lies." That was the beginning of a love both fierce and destructive, a union that would shape and scar her as deeply as the accident once did. Their marriage is a storm of genius and betrayal of devotion and distance. Frida calls Diego the other accident of her life. They fight, they part, they return. Yet through all of it, she paints more honestly, more fiercely, as though love itself were another canvas demanding truth. Her portraits become mirrors, not just for herself, but for every woman who has loved too deeply and survived. Frida's home becomes a sanctuary of color and chaos, blue walls, green parrots, red flowers, laughter, pain, and paint. She fills it with relics of indigenous Mexico, with dolls, ribbons, and skeletons celebrating death as if it were an old friend. When she paints her heart, it is always visible, exposed, bleeding, beautiful. She paints not to escape life, but to face it more clearly. Years pass, and her health declines again. Surgeries, infections, amputations. Her body is a battlefield, yet her eyes remain luminous, defiant. She attends her final exhibition in 1953, lying in a hospital bed, brought to the gallery by ambulance. The crowd gathers astonished as she laughs and lifts her glass of tequila, toasting the room. "I am not sick," she says. "I am broken, but I am happy to be alive as long as I can paint." That night, as she lies under the soft glow of candles, the scent of paint still clinging to her hands, she writes in her diary, "I hope the exit is joyful, and I hope never to return." She dies the following year at the age of 47 in the same blue house where she was born. But Frida Kahlo does not vanish. Her spirit lingers in her paintings, in the self-portraits that stare unflinchingly back at the world, in the flowers that grow from wounds in the eyes that see both agony and grace. She becomes an icon, not of perfection, but of resilience. Her name travels across generations, carried by those who find courage in her defiance, beauty in her pain. And as you stand before one of her paintings today, perhaps the one where her two hearts are joined by a single artery, you can feel it. The same pulse that beat in the Red Queen's chamber, the same will that guided Catherine through her crown of storms, the same breath that kept the nameless woman in the village alive through her days of toil. Frida's colors whisper what every soul eventually learns, that suffering can destroy or transform, that pain can be the seed of art, and that even from the darkest wound, something luminous can bloom. And when you close your eyes, the red on her canvas becomes the red of dawn once more, the promise that no matter how many times life shatters, it can always be remade, stroke by tender stroke, into something worth loving again. Chapter 14. The Fire Within and the Paintings That Wept. The memory of Frida lingers long after her colors fade. Her reds and blues still pulse behind your eyelids, the red of her wounds, the blue of her walls, the strange brightness that came from her pain. You remember her lying in her hospital bed, laughing through her agony, lifting a glass to life itself. And as the sound of her laughter dissolves into silence, something tender remains, the echo of courage, the quiet truth that the human spirit can turn even suffering into art. But her story does not end with the accident, nor with her death. It continues in the light that still burns behind every brushstroke in the fire she left behind. The year is 1931. Mexico City hums with noise and contradiction, revolution and hope, sorrow and rebirth. Frida walks beside Diego Rivera through a crowd of admirers. She is small beside him, but her presence is radiant, magnetic. The newspapers call them the elephant and the dove, though no one can quite say which is which. They are opposites in everything except passion. Diego paints on walls for the people. Frida paints on small canvases for her soul. Yet together they ignite the imagination of a nation. Their marriage is a constant storm. Diego's affairs leave wounds deeper than her surgeries. Frida's jealousy burns, but she hides it behind laughter and cigarettes. Still, she cannot live without him. They are bound not by peace but by recognition. Two souls that see too much love, too much feel too much. When he paints her face into his murals, she feels both adored and imprisoned. When she paints him, she captures him not as a man, but as a myth larger than life, yet small before her pain. Her art becomes her confessional. In the two Fridas, she paints herself doubled, one dressed in white, heart-torn and bleeding, the other in vibrant Tehuana dress, heart whole but exposed. Between them runs a single artery connecting one to the other, feeding both life and loss. She holds surgical scissors in her hand, but the cut never comes. It is her truest painting, the portrait of a woman split between love and independence, between who she is and who she must become to survive. Frida fills her canvases with symbolism, drawn from Mexican folklore and her own body. Monkeys, thorns, skeletons, and hummingbirds, each a fragment of her story. She paints her miscarriages, her loneliness, her fierce pride in her indigenous heritage. In one painting, she appears as a deer pierced by arrows, her face serene despite the wounds. In another, she stands before a barren landscape, roots tangled in her feet, unable to move, yet unwilling to fall. Her art becomes a diary written in symbols, a language of pain so precise that even the viewer cannot look away. Critics abroad call her surrealist, but she dismisses the label. They thought I was a surrealist, she says, but I wasn't. I never painted dreams. I painted my own reality. And indeed, her reality was both terrifying and beautiful, a world where blood could bloom into flowers, where suffering could transform into light. She painted as if her life depended on it, and in truth it did. As years pass, Frida's health worsens. Her spine collapses. Her right leg is amputated. Infections return again and again. Yet every time the doctors declare her finished, she proves them wrong. She paints from her bed, from her wheelchair, from the thin line between consciousness and fever. Her paintings grow smaller, more intimate, as though she is compressing the entire universe into one breath. Diego, for all his betrayals, never stops loving her. When she lies in the hospital half asleep from morphine, he sits beside her sketching her face. He once told a friend, "Frida is the only reason I stay alive." But love for them was always an open wound, raw, real, and eternal. One night, as rain falls outside the blue house, Frida asks Diego to bring her paints. She sits upright in bed, her eyes luminous despite the pain. Tonight, she says, I want to paint something happy. Diego watches her dip her brush into green, then yellow, then blue. Slowly on the canvas, an image begins to form, a watermelon, sliced open its flesh, glistening seeds dark and shining. Across the surface, she writes her final words. Viva la vida. Long live life. It is a painting of defiance, of gratitude, of surrender all at once. She smiles faintly, brushes drying in her hands. See, she whispers. Even fruit can bleed and still be sweet. Days later, her body gives up. She dies as she had lived, surrounded by color, by laughter, by chaos and love. At her funeral, Diego places red roses upon her coffin and whispers, "I have never loved another woman more than I love you." Her body is cremated, and those who attend say that as the flames rose, her hair seemed to blaze like a halo of fire, as if her spirit refused to leave quietly. But Frida never truly dies. She becomes part of Mexico itself, its art, its pain, its strength. Her face adorns walls, coins, and hearts across the world. Young women see her as a symbol of courage, artists as a patron saint of truth. In her self-portraits, she stares directly at you, unflinching, as if daring you to look back and not turn away. You can still feel her watching, her eyes dark and bright, at once a mirror reflecting everything raw and beautiful in being human. If you listen closely, you can almost hear her whisper from within her canvases, "Do not pity me. Love me for surviving." Her fire still burns in every artist who dares to tell the truth, in every soul who transforms pain into creation. And so as you step away from her final painting, the colors seem to move red, melting into pink, green, into gold, as though the canvas itself is breathing. Outside, the Mexican sky glows with sunset rich and tender. The air hums with distant laughter, the sound of guitars, the promise of another night filled with stories. The fire she carried, that sacred flame of endurance, has not gone out. It has only changed hands, passing from her to anyone who chooses to live fully, love fiercely, and turn sorrow into something luminous. And somewhere far beyond the blue house, far beyond time, Frida's spirit still paints her brush, dipped not in pigment, but in light. Each stroke a prayer for those who still believe that beauty, even when born from pain, is the most human miracle of all. Chapter 15. The color that never fades. The last flicker of Frida's fire still glows behind your eyelids, her laughter, her pain, her defiance. The scent of turpentine and roses lingers in the air, mingling with the memory of her final words, "Viva la vida," long live life. You can almost see her leaning over a canvas, her brush trembling, her eyes alight with that impossible blend of joy and agony. As the colors of her world begin to fade into twilight, another kind of light begins to rise, softer, eternal. Because every story of endurance leads here to this moment where life and art, pain and faith become one. It is evening again. The world feels quiet, wrapped in that sacred hour between dusk and night, when everything seems to remember itself. The air is warm, and the last light spills across the horizon in gold and violet hues. Somewhere, a candle flickers beside a window, and an old radio hums a distant tune. You close your eyes and feel the rhythm of all the women whose stories you've followed. The nameless villager, the Empress of Russia, the Red Queen, and Frida with her painted heart. They are no longer separate. They are threads of the same tapestry, woven from endurance, beauty, and love that refuse to die. Time moves differently here. Centuries collapse into seconds. You see Catherine the Great standing beneath the Russian snow, her crown glinting like ice. The Red Queen lying in her crimson tomb, her jade mask gleaming softly in the dark. And Frida sitting in her blue house, her hands stained with color. They are bound not by place or age, but by a quiet knowing that creation and pain share the same root, that to live fully is to burn and to bloom at once. The candlelight trembles as if stirred by unseen hands. It's easy to believe in this moment that their spirits still walk among us not as ghosts, but as echoes of something greater. The woman who toiled silently by her hearth in the first chapters, the queen who ruled through storms, the artist who painted from her wounds, each one carried the same invisible flame. It is the flame that lives within every heart, that dares to love despite the cost to build, despite the ruin to hope, despite the night. Now imagine the world without them, without the compassion of hands that healed the wisdom of minds, that questioned the art that turned grief into grace. Imagine silence, where there should have been song. That silence is the true death humanity fears, and it is precisely what these women refuse to surrender to. Their stories remind us that immortality does not belong to kings or gods, but to those who create, who forgive, who continue. In the Museum of Time, their footsteps echo. You can almost hear the soft click of Catherine's heels in the marble halls of her empire, the quiet breath of the Red Queen beneath the soil, the rustle of Frida's skirts as she moves between easels humming to herself. They are not gone. They have become the pulse of history, steady, unbroken, eternal. And perhaps that is the secret truth behind all of this, that beauty, when born from suffering, does not fade. It multiplies. The same way fire spreads from candle to candle, their courage has lit countless lives since. The woman who kneels by her child's grave now prays with Frida's colors in her heart. The student who studies history carries Catherine's reason in her eyes. The girl who gazes at the moon remembers the Red Queen and feels less alone. This is their legacy, not power, not fame, but the quiet transference of light. You look up at the night sky, and the stars seem to pulse like embers, fragments of every story ever told. Each one a reminder that we are made of the same dust as those who came before us, that within every fragile body burns something divine. Maybe that is why art moves us so deeply, why stories never die. They are the ways we remember the sacred fire inside us, the way we whisper back to time I was here too. In the far corner of that imaginary gallery of memory, you see a final painting, one you have never seen before. It isn't signed by any artist. Its colors shift gently, changing with the light. In it all, the women's faces seem to merge: the queen, the empress, the peasant, the painter. Their eyes meet yours, and in them you see your own reflection. You realize then that the story has never been about them alone. It has always been about you, about everyone who chooses to keep living, to keep loving, to keep creating, even when the world grows dark. The music from the radio fades. The candle burns lower. Outside, the first stars appear scattered across the sky like the beginnings of a new canvas. You breathe in deeply, feeling something awaken within you. That same red spark that has traveled through centuries, crossing oceans and lifetimes to reach this quiet moment. The woman in the village once whispered her prayer in the dark. Catherine faced storms with dignity. The Red Queen slept in her crimson tomb and still glowed beneath the earth. Frida painted her pain until it became beauty. And now, you, the listener, the dreamer, the inheritor of their light, stand in the same line of flame. You whisper softly, not as a wish,
but as a vow. The color will not fade. And as the words leave your lips, the stars seem to pulse brighter. Somewhere in the distance, a faint echo rises, the sound of brushes against canvas, the murmur of faith, the heartbeat of creation itself. It is the same sound that has guided every soul who refused to surrender to despair.
The night deepens, but it is not dark. It is painted red, as love blue, as longing gold as dawn. And in that endless tapestry of color, every story continues. Every life becomes art, and every ending turns quietly, tenderly, into a beginning once more. And so, when the last candle burns low, and silence settles once more over the pages of time, what remains is not the sorrow, nor even the glory, but the light. The same quiet light that flickered in the hands of a nameless woman, tending her fire that glowed behind Catherine's crown, that shimmered in the Red Queen's jade mask, that blazed through Frida's wounded heart. It is the light of endurance, soft, steadfast, unyielding, passed from one soul to another across centuries and oceans. History remembers their names in whispers, but eternity remembers their spirit in color. They were not perfect. They were human, which is to say, divine in their imperfection. Each carried the same silent vow that no darkness would ever be final, that even pain could be transformed into beauty if met with love. Now their stories belong to you. The brush is in your hand, the canvas is your life, and the flame they carried burns quietly in your chest. Guard it, feed it, let it light the way for those who come after you. For in the end, it is not time that defines us. It is what we choose to keep shining when everything else fades. The color never fades. The story never ends. It simply becomes light,